I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. It's a real privilege to have a conversation with Pepita. Pepita, thank you for coming, and thank you all for being here this morning. From both of us, Sadasina Namaskaram. I want to personally welcome Pepita to Pulickan, Tripunithura, and to Kanikota Palace. Pepita, you were very much in the news lately for gaining the citizenship of India. How do you feel about making it official? Because you've been here a long time, and like you were introduced, at heart you were a Malayali for a long time, but still making the citizenship an official thing. How do you feel about it?
To be honest with you, the real thing about citizenship is that I wanted to run away. Because I had been so long in Kerala. The only thing is that I was, of course, always very hesitant as to when I might have to leave for visas and all those kind of things. But when I finally did get citizenship, it actually changed everything. I mean, it just felt so right. But more than anything else, I think at that time, was just how people reacted to it. It was quite extraordinary how many people seemed to be absolutely delighted that it had happened. I should maybe tell you one little story. I live in Thrissur, and every morning I go to get my paper and have a cup of tea. And I go behind the Tirumbadi when I do that, go down that lane. And in that lane, there are 2 or 3 priestly families living. And, we would just sort of do this when we passed and everything. But on the day that I got citizenship, he stopped. He said, I have to tell you something. We have been very worried why it was that you were not getting citizenship. And then he said, actually, we realized what it was, that Gurayappan was not a Malayali, so he didn't know what was happening.
That's a good one. You also received the top civilian award, Padma Shri, and you had a nice story to say about receiving Padma Shri and how the Guruvayur temple contacted you about that. Would you like to share that story with us?
Yes, it was first of all, when I got the phone call saying that I'd been given a Padma Shri, I thought somebody was just doing it as a joke, because it never occurred to me that what I did, because I was interested in doing it, was of any particular interest to anybody else. Anyway, what happened is I was in Thrissur, and somebody came from Guruvayur to tell me that before Thrissur got into the act, they wanted everybody to realize that I owned them, not anybody else. And about 5 minutes later, somebody from Thrissur came and said, actually, we own her. So, I mean, in the end, of course, Guruvayur won, because actually they got in first. But what happened in Guruvayur was really, a lot of things that I seem to get involved with actually are magical. And one of them was that two of the people in the temple said, this is absolutely wonderful, but I think it must be the first time that Gurayappan has had a Padma Shri. In other words, the Padma Shri moved out of my hands, if you like, into belonging to Gurayappan. And again, what has happened was that how the temple responded with such joy to this having happened. I mean, they were all going around trying to work out if Gurayappan had ever had a Padma Shri before. And that was what was, it's when the divine becomes in in some kind of magical way, part of ordinary people, and that he too wants of course, the book itself had to be wrapped in yellow silk and taken to the sanctum. And I suspect this may be one of the only, if not the few times, that one single person has walked from the Kodimaram right down to the sanctum alone. We all know that is usually a place where you can't draw breath because everybody's so squashed. So I walked all by myself down to the Sopanam, handed the book to one of the Kishandis, who then handed it to the Meshandi who was there, who then unwrapped the book and showed it to Guru Ayyappan. So you never know how.
Thank you for sharing that. I knew there was something very special about that story when she mentioned it to me. About Guruvayur, if I may continue on that vein, tell us about Guruvayur, the elephant, Keshavan, Guruvayur Keshavan. It could be a small article, Guruvayur Keshavan and Pepita. He looked back at you.
Yes, he was huge. But that small eye looking down on you. And in fact, I nearly came to grief because he was in must. And I bent down to my camera bag to change the lens or something, I don't know what. And at that, as I started to go down, he threw a huge tree at me. No, I don't say it was at me, but it was coming in my direction. And had I not bent down, I wouldn't be here talking to you now. But he radiated something that was not the same as other elephants. And all those sort of elephant maniacs that gather round elephants, and I used to stand behind them because a little bit of mania was in me too, endlessly discussing his plus points and minuses. And although they said that as far as elephants is concerned, he really wasn't that beautiful, but he had everything else that was wonderful about him. And it was extraordinary to be able to stand in the end next to him and see that. And of course, I'm sure many people know the story of his death. Does everybody know right up on the story of Keshavan's death? Okay, so of course, every year he carried the Tadamba for during the Utsavam. Because he was very obviously getting older and having a job going up and down. So they decided that it was too big a risk for anything to happen to him in the temple. So he was taken out, and I think Raman Kuti came in as a substitute. But Guru Keshavan knew what was his job, and everybody was looking at it, and suddenly there was this sort of hush, and from behind, Guru Keshavan was coming in without anybody with him. And although the building was absolutely squashed with people, they sort of drew aside, and one of the people said to him, "Okay, this time we'll take you, but you better be, next time it won't be you." And he kneeled, and it was like a block of flats going up and down, but you could see the strain that he was under. But anyway, he did it and came out, and he was told very clearly that next year you have to be able to do it. Next year he knew better, but at the same time they realized that they were in trouble. So they changed the rules that whatever they would use Guru Keshavan until and if. And that was the time when he came, he knelt, he did what he had to do, left the temple, went to his place on the other side, lay down, dug his left tusk in the sand or whatever, towards his Lord in the temple, and on the moment of Ekadashi striking, died.
When Asian Games was going on, they decided to use an elephant as a mascot, and several elephants were herded into a train from Thrissur to Delhi.
Yeah, shall I? Because I was there when it happened. Would you like me?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, when the Anavandi was to go to for the Asian Games in 1982, I think, they brought all the elephants to Trichyur station, and many more of them were obviously ever going to get on the train. So I asked somebody, why are they bringing so many? And he said, listen, if an elephant doesn't want to get on a train, there's not a lot you can do about it. So then what they did, which is the secret part, which I'm now letting you into, as you can imagine, at Trichyur railway station, there were politicians and cameras and this thing, that thing, and the other thing, which was not much. It was driving the people who were trying to organize the elephants and everything mad. So the train set out and went to Vadagancheri, which is about, I think, just about an hour way from Trichyur. And they got most of the people who were knowledgeable about elephants, and also some of them had their own elephants, were actually in and around Vadagancheri. So they went down a siding, and that's where they just made sure that as far as was humanly possible, that everything was absolutely okay for the elephants and how they were going to feed them and how were this. And they had to take the pananpata with them, because although it's available in other states, the Malayali belief was that nobody would know what to do with it. So what they had to take with them was quite amazing, including big urilis for making food. So the first stop after that was, I can't remember the name of the station, frankly, but it was not in Kerala. And, the Malayalis just took all the big urilis off the train, started filling them to make food for everybody, as if it was no big thing, and that's what they were doing, and they weren't interested in what anybody else was doing. And I strongly suspect that the station master just ran away because he didn't know what he was doing either. But all these people were standing there completely frozen because they had never seen, for a start, whatever it was, 34 elephants on a train. And they certainly didn't know what they were doing on that train. So it was, from then onwards, it was when the train stopped anywhere, huge numbers of people came. Now also it has to be remembered that in 1984, it was not a question of there being no mobiles, but there were almost no I keep losing the words, telephones anyway. So they just sort of winged it on their own. Also by then, Delhi was telling them to hurry up. So then that was it. That was all they needed. They were going to do it their way. So, but people also were coming, or Malayalis who living along the route or near the station or whatever. They were the people that actually provided much of the information about what was going on elsewhere, because they would come to whenever the train stops, they would turn up. They would turn up with food for us all, as if we were never going to see it, and letters to relatives and things went backwards and forwards. So it was really quite extraordinary. Now, most of the time, almost all the time, in fact, I sat on the bogies where they could take two elephants, one facing either way, and between them was where their mahouts would sort of live and sleep and everything. So in the daytime, I was mostly there. But at one station, which was a small space, they said to me, look, everybody's very hungry and we can't stop long enough to do food. So will you please go and get some omelets? And I had to get 300 of them. There were 3 stalls, so I had to go up to each one and ask for 100 omelets. And they came. That was amazing. So it was an extraordinary, when the train started to really move in the general direction of North India, is that, of course, trains, we don't really notice it maybe when we're traveling on them, actually don't follow roads. No, they go cross country. So when you get a big train loaded with elephants, for instance, but it could be anything, going at a very slow speed in order not to unduly upset the elephants, it's like a huge kind of family or tribe on the move, because it's moving so slowly, and you see this vast thing of North India sort of stretching before you, and it was a way of seeing things that you don't get, obviously, if you're in an ordinary train following an ordinary railway track. So, but it was very difficult for some, because some of the elephants got sick also, because I think one of also the things about elephants is they're huge, of course, but they're also very fragile animals. They can't take much. They get rattled by it. So all the time, people were sitting with the elephants, calming them down. Now there was one man. He was an elephant owner, so he was sitting next to his elephant, and really intensely watching him. So I asked him, is there a problem? He said, yes, there's a real problem. You see, he has swallowed my vest, so I'm waiting for the motions. I don't think he ever got them back, but who knows. So, and people had all their elephant stories on the train. It was one of the most, I think it was 8-9 days, I can't really remember. Such a strange, it's a completely different world, place. Everything about it was different. But finally we got to Pulickan, and the last thing was the 40 kilometer, no, not kind of been as long, 40-minute walk to the deer park, where they basically just collapsed. But they had about a week before they had to go for the actual opening of the Asian Games. Now, I suppose all these years later, I can tell you, I don't think I had official permission to be on the train. Anyway, so when I got to Delhi, all the people there said to me, just when the elephants, because they were going to do rehearsals, the elephants will come into the big ring and practice, and a lot of people were there to do with Delhi wanted to know what the hell was going on, of course. So why they were there, what they were doing, why weren't they getting on with it, sort of thing. They were getting on with it, but not in a Delhi way, I suspect. So I was to come in from the top and just work my way down to the center of the ring. And a man near the end stepped forward, and I realized it was a Malayali, but he was a policeman. He said, "Listen, I know who you are, and I know you shouldn't be here, but go and sit down there." So, but then the most amazing thing that happened, and talk about something being a giveaway, when there were 15 elephants lined up, they were standing on the elephants, they got the whatnots and suddenly somebody saw where I was, and they started waving at me. So it was a mixture of all kinds of things happening which were funny, wonderful. A lot of people worried about this and worried about that, but it was really extraordinary to see that thing happen. And and then the stories, of course, and then they all went back to basically Trichyur, all except for one, which was Kuti Krishnan from the Shankarankarangara thing, because he came into must. And there was obviously no way of going with him. And also, don't forget, for Malayalis, Delhi in November is pretty cold. So they were all sort of shivering and everything. But I had not gone back, and there were no mobiles or anything. So, But somebody managed to find me in Delhi and asked me to go down to the deer park and find out what, and they had just been given nothing. Just nothing. And the elephant, he was in an absolute rage too. But so things then people were sent to do their thing. And finally, he came back to Trichyur when he came down from the mosque he went first to the Vadakanathan and prostrated, and then he went to the Shangarangalangara temple, which is where he belonged. And it was very moving to see him come home. It really was. But all kinds of stories were then talked about, the goods and ons and off of taking elephants like that. And, it was a kind of experiment to see that it happened. I mean, they knew what would happen. And also, what was really, I thought, bad is they said, well, we broke things because we explained, how the elephants are, what they need. I mean, Guruvayu had been looking after its elephants and doing what they need and what they don't need and how they are for a long time, but these things need to be done. So anyway, something other than elephants now. By the way, I was known as the Anamadama at that stage.
Thank you, Pepita, for that. Honestly, her life is just full of adventures like this. Imagine getting on a train with, several elephants and all the caretakers of the elephants, and then there was Pepita, one girl amongst them. She's been a Malayali girl for a long time. Before we move on from the subject of Guruvayu, because she has written such an exhaustive, beautiful book on Guruvayu, people sometimes wonder, how did you get so much access into the temple? And I'll try to help you with that. Which part of it?
Yeah, I think we should break it down to that stuff, how I got access.
Okay.
Otherwise we're going to have a bottleneck.
Oh, yes, we have other things to talk about.
For a long time, I used to go outside the temple and pray from outside, and I didn't expect anything else to happen. And then somebody came out of the temple once and said, "Why are you standing out there?" So I said, "Well, just look at me." He said, No, the Tantri has said you can come in. I said, "Tantri has not said so to me." And he said, No, he said. So anyway, the piece of paper then came to say that I could come in. And from then onwards, nobody, I thought, it was a kind of incident, let's face it, that can blow up and you can't bring it down. But again, people were really extraordinary. And then one afternoon, I was talking to two of the Davidson officials. And one of them turned to me and said, "Why is it that you take photographs in every other temple and wherever, but you never take them in Guruvayu?" So I said, "Well, Guruvayu is a sort of one-off, and I don't think taking photographs in here is anything to even think about doing." He said, No, Guruvayu won't mind. And I said, "Well, I'll think about it." The man went berserk. He said, "Who are you to make a decision when Guruvayu has just given you permission to do the book?" So I had no sort of option. Now, I had never written a book of any kind on anything. So to choose somebody like me who also probably didn't know that much about how the temple functioned. So anyway, one morning I thought, well, let me at least make a round. And on the third round, I would decide whatever they say. I had pre-decided to say no, of course. So I went round and I thought, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to do this. First of all, the lighting in Guruvayu temple is dreadful anyway from a photographic point of view. But so the second round, this is really getting bad, I thought. I'm going to have to act like a grown-up and go and say to them, I really can't do it. Almost on the end of the third round, I saw a man sitting down on the floor near the flagpole. And he just smiled at me. I don't know what happened. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll do the book now. And, it just happened that from then onwards they would come and say, is there anything you need? But otherwise they basically let me go to do what I want to do. I mean, if I had any apprehension about not being allowed there or this or that or the other, then of course I did something about it. Although one of the audicans came up to me one day and he said, I just want to tell you something, but you are not to ever print it or tell anybody anyway. He said, but if I don't tell you, you will make a hideous mistake. To which I said, well, I will make a hideous mistake anyway, but go ahead, sort of thing. Because he said, I have to tell you this about the sanctum and everything, but you are not to ever even think about it. And the thing is, I remembered where I could go and what I could go, but I have completely forgotten what it was he said I wasn't to talk about. But I think that is an art they also profess. And I used to have lessons so that I knew what they were doing about when they come and chant, when they do this, that, and the other. And there was a sort of a joke in, because at least Malayalis always can take a joke and make a joke too. They said, well, if the country is out, which happened one year, the country was out, the 4 Odikans were out, the Kishandis were out, and they just had one Patakaran who was able to do the Shiveli, because for one reason or another they were. And they said at one time we thought we were going to have to use you, but the extraordinary thing was their willingness to teach me. And I used to have lessons from one of the Odikans once a week. And then I went to a wonderful man, I don't know whether anybody here will have known about him, Chittor Narayanan Nambuduripad, who lived in Chirp, who had rung me up one day and he said, who is teaching you about the rituals? I said, Tirumeni, I'm trying to pretend that they don't exist because I can't deal with it. He said, my house every week for a full day. So he taught me. So then he said, the procedure of the rituals will be the same everywhere, but it will be visually done by different temples getting the same result, if you like. So you will have to go to somebody in Guruvayu who will tell you how it is actually physically done there. So I went to Pottukuri. Actually, I didn't go to Pottukuri because I was too scared to. So I went to one of the other people there, and I said, I can't just go and ask him anything. So what they did behind my back was they rang Pottukuri and told him to ring me because he wanted to see me. So that's how they got round that. So I went there, and he explained everything of how it is done. So a long time, there was a joke in Guruvayu that if every single person from the country downwards was out, I could take over. That chance.
Thank you. There's so much more we want to talk about your book on Teyam. But before I move on from Guruvayu, we all here want to know about you growing up in Suffolk, UK.
Going backwards, yes.
And I know you grew up on a farm with you loved horses and all that, and then you happened to read your great-grandfather's diary.
I think these things could be split.
Okay.
So I do the farm business and then the other things, because running them together is not so. So what was something?
No, let's talk about your grandfather's story. Great-grandfather's story. Would that?
No, I was born in Suffolk.
Suffolk. Yes, do talk about Suffolk.
Now, I was born in Suffolk. in 1942, which, okay, you could do the maths, 84. Because it was still, the war was still on, and there was nothing. Everybody walked everywhere because you couldn't get petrol except in very special circumstances. So I had to walk to school 4 miles there, 4 miles back. Everybody did. Very, very, and but Suffolk is, people who do or don't know, when this side of England comes down, and then there's a bulge, and then there's a bit like this. The bottom half of the bulge is where there is Suffolk, which is like, what do you call them here? What in England it's called I've even forgotten that. The area, district. The word for district in England is, I've forgotten that now. County, yes, thank you very much. So Suffolk is a county, and it was the lower one, which Suffolk, the south folk, Norfolk, the north folk. Let me tell you up front, north folk are people, just, we don't talk about them, right? And so my parents were busy, and also they were the kind of people who thought that children were to be seen but not heard. My brother was sent off to school anyway, and I sort of rang and riot. Well, not riot, because I used to, it was very small, I used to follow the people working on the farm, because they had these magical, wonderful stories to tell about ghosts and all kinds of divine beings. And they just had one story after another. One day, one of them said to me, sometimes, he said, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you can actually hear the Roman legions heading in a way home to take the boats to take them back to Italy. But the thing is, the Romans had indeed been in the UK, but they'd long gone by 410, I can tell you. Then there were, sometimes they said you could hear where the Vikings had landed and rampaged around. Everything was a question of listening to a kind of oblique universe. It was there, it was not there, it was maybe here. So I grew up, sadly not my brother, he went into a traditional way of being taught, but I grew up being told all these amazing stories, which were just stories to me. And it was, it was magic. But I will now jump right forward to the end. Because when I came to Kerala, it was the same thing. Everybody had these stories. And I couldn't believe it. So I settled in very quickly, because it was these stories that were the same thing. Then one day, one of the Theyakarans, Lakshmanan Peravanan, who is an extraordinary man, I had told him about a man who was very influential to me as a child in Suffolk, called Fred Borley. And I had told him, and Fred was the one that used to have this, he could weave into areas that people couldn't see. He would tell stories about people who were invisible. It was the Kerala version of thing. So I had told Lakshmanan about Fred, and he came to me one day and he said, "What does Fred look like?" And I said, who was long gone, by the way. And I said, "Well, I can describe it to you, but I don't sadly have a photograph of him." But I described him. He said, yes. And then he said, "You see, my father, Krishnan Peravanan, and Fred Borley are very good friends, and they're going about together, and they're looking after you." Now, stop telling these kind of ridiculous stories, half the room is thinking. But I tell you, that's what happened. And that is why Suffolk was a godsend to me, because Suffolk was really no different to Malabar. The way things were oblique and all that was there.
Okay. Speaking about Payam, you lived in the community of Payakar for many years, 15 years.
In a small house.
And you had no trouble with the language. You had no trouble with food, living with them.
Well, I had trouble with food because Murli Panika's wife, Lata, kept the chili powder in a bucket. So there was some trouble with the food.
And the book is beautifully illustrated with photographs. I won't ask you about the photography side of it because you're obviously so darn good about it. But in the book, you get into the pain that Payakars are experiencing now. The tradition of Payam is giving way to commercial aspect of just becoming a popular.
It's almost, I would say, pretty close to impossible to be fair to everybody here. Traditionally, of course, at one time, I'm very aware of many of the people sitting here are vastly more informed than me. So you can come and blame me afterwards, please. But the thing is, one of the things is a long time ago, there was much more interaction, I think, between the people that in a way oversaw Thayam because of their family and where they lived and who they were. And there was, the Thayakarans had to be up to the mark in the same way as the Karnavas had to be up to the mark. Once they stopped being up to the mark, the Thayakarans started slipping. And then there were a lot of, I saw a man once, what do they call him? All these titles, sometimes I forget it. But when the Thayam is to be done, they will usually, because never ever make a definitive statement because they don't exist. So where the Thayam has come from, when he goes to other places, he has to say, I have come from this place, I have come from here, I've come from here, and now I'm here. So it doesn't take long for the Thayakaran to say, I have come from A, B, C. Other Thayams, who come from long back, there will be a prolonged list of where it's come from. But in this case, it was just the start, the next one, and the where he was. And the man was standing there saying, make it fast, make it fast, make it fast. Now once you get that kind of situation where they're not bothered, everything starts to break down. And then, guess who gets blamed? You're right, the Thayakarans. And it's, there was a controversy, which is probably known here, when Tichamundi was done near Kannur, in other words, near the city. Now, one of the things I did, it's in the book, is how they do Tichamundi. First of all, the Thayakarans are no stupider than anybody else. They know the danger of having fire, jumping what looks like they're jumping into the fire, although they actually have things attached so they can be pulled back at the last moment. They are meticulous about doing that. Naturally, they want to come out alive. And this blew up in everybody's face because a young boy did it. He was about 12. And his father, and I knew all these people well, his father kept telling him, no, you're too young, you're too young. And then he said, well, so-and-so did it when he was 11, so why can't I? So in the end, his father said, okay, trained him meticulously, and nothing went wrong, because they're not idiots. Would you want to see your son burned alive? No. So everything is they test everything, where they're tied, where they're not tied, everything. And it blew up, all the activists came out and everything, and they said this is, barbaric doing this with a child, and throwing a child 100 times in the fire is really dreadful. I said, so I sat down and wrote a letter, and I said, look, first of all, if a child is thrown in the fire, that's it. There's no question of it being thrown in the fire 100 times. So straight away, you're speaking absolute nonsense. And I also said, how they, a abridged version of how they do it, how meticulous they are, and also the concept of why it's done anyway. And I sent it off, I won't name the paper, out of whatever, and they never printed it. And I think there's a court case still going on about child abuse in Thayum. Now, I don't know what anybody thinks, but first time I saw Tichamundi, I thought, I don't really know whether I want to come that close. But it is a very important Thayum, and it was this was not the boy business was not there. Some much older Thayakaran was doing it, who was a sort of professional. And so I was able to see him and photograph him doing it. And they all said the same thing of what you have to do in order to do it and come out the other side. But the papers don't want to know that, or somebody doesn't want to know it anyway. So it's okay.
Yeah. Like you say in the book as well, despite their extraordinary skills and knowledge, there is no respect for the Thayakaran. And she quotes an example where during the festival, these days there will be a Gana Mela, loud music that drowns out the Thayakaran's song, and there's just no respect shown to them. And I think this is sort of applicable to all the different things like Melam and all those fields.
Yes, some of this is improving, mostly I think because the Thayakarams themselves, frankly, have had enough. They don't get paid much, and also it should be, at the best situation is, it's a 6-month job, because 6 months of the year there's no Thayam. So they have to have other forms of getting food in their mouths. One of the ones that's really saved them is, because they used to, I don't know, they had an absolute fixation of getting jobs in medical shops. Maybe they could get free treatment, I don't know, but they did anyway. And of course the shopkeepers used to get mad when the Thay season came, because they all evaporated. But now what they've done is they hit upon the idea of auto rickshaws, which is actually brilliant, because even if there's a day when nothing is going on, they can jump in their auto rickshaw and drive up and down and get people. So they're getting smarter. But now what has happened just now is that there was an incident recently where the Thayakaran, all made up with the mudi and everything, came out where he was supposed to then run to the area where the, for want of a better word, performance took place. He couldn't get out because as close as the front row, closer than the front row here, was a barrage of photographers who couldn't care less, it appears to me, about what they're doing. They've come to take their photographs, rush home, put them in the paper or wherever, and get paid for it. And I think that was the thing that broke the back of everybody. So now what has appeared this year are signs in English and Malayalam saying no photography, which is actually going back to the very beginning when photography was absolutely banned. But then it was very easy to ban it because who had a camera anyway? And it was of course, the mobile phone that couldn't be controlled, really. Although it was Lakshmanan Peruvanan who was doing a very powerful Bhagavati, and the guy there with his mobile phone, and he just leaned forward, took it, and just threw it into the nearest pond. End of story. So there was a meeting afterwards, and they said to him, "Did you know he was doing it?" And he came up with it because it wasn't him then, it was the Thayam. He said, no, it was done, not done by me. But from then onwards, they realized if they were smart, they could in fact take the power into themselves. So now, as I say, no in English and Malayalam, no photography. Photographers are to go in that corner, they're not to budge, and they are to pay, which is I think a very difficult move for them because, centuries of that's what you do and everything, but it's not easy for them. But if they can work out how they can do it, then it'll be a very step forward, I think.
As 15 years came and went, far exceeding the time I had expected to devote to Thayam, I became tangibly aware of the role being played by Thayam's deities, suspicions that were clarified when I approached Paramataki Bhagavati to make my offering and receive her blessings. After looking at me for just a moment, she took my hand, pulled me close, and said, "You should never think it was your decision to do this work. It was not. It was our decision." She felt, which brings up another interesting question. You went from Guruvayur temple, which is a Vishnu and Brahmanical traditions, a temple with Brahmanical traditions, to Kannur, the tribal area with the Thayams and all that. And even in the book, you mentioned that you facilitated a conversation between your friend Lakshmanan Peruvanan and a Tirumeni who lives in Cherpa, Chittur Tirumeni, Chittur Mana.
I'm sure there are people here that know him or knew him. Sure. Yes?
Does anyone know who she's talking about?
He was an amazing man. And actually what happened, this is really extraordinary, how times change, how people recognize each other and all those things. I had I'd spoken to Tirumeni about Thayam, and he said, actually, I don't know anything about it. And there was a slight tinge to the fact of probably I don't want to know anything about it. So I said, no, it's absolutely magical. So in the end, that's right. So there I am up in Malabar, and Lakshman and another man, Pulickan, who is on the cover of the book, were talking about
something about
one particular deity as to who, because always the question is, who is the deity? Who isn't? What you see is not necessarily who is the deity. And then Lakshmanan said with a huge laugh, he said, actually, what we need is a Nambudri. And they all burst into laughter and said, because he would know. So I said, do you want to talk to a Nambudri? He said, yes, but. I said, okay. So I called Tirumeni, who by then had warmed to the whole idea anyway. And I said, they're having a thing about this deity, it'll come to me in a minute, or won't, and talk, because there was a discussion going on and they feel that you could help. They were on the phone for about an hour and a half, and I spent most of that hour and a half running downstairs, putting money in the thing, and running back up again. But when they finished, Lakshmanan said to me, actually he turned to me and said, "Super!" And then he said, "But I have to meet him. I have to speak to him." Then when we went back. Lakshmanan came to stay with me before he went back to Malabar. And I rang Tirumeni and said, thank you for meeting him or speaking to him and meeting him everything. And he said something totally amazing. He said, "That man knows what I know." And I tried to find 100 different ways of asking that question, knowing that to ask that question would be incredibly rude, and I simply couldn't do it. But instead of which, Tirumeni volunteered the answer. Then what happened next is even more extraordinary. Tirumeni was really unwell and sadly left his body very soon afterwards. Anyway, Lakshmanan called me one day and he said, I'm coming down, but I'm going straight to Chirp. So I said, "Do you need me or anything?" He said, "No." He stayed in Chirp Manor. Now, those men could not have been, well, first of all, to begin with, more physically different than you can imagine. Tirumeni was sort of tall, thin and ascetic, and the Lakshmanan is round and roly-poly. I mean, they had nothing in common in a way. But actually, his respect for Lakshmana and vice versa, of course, was such that he stayed in the mana because of Tirumeni's respect for who he was. I mean, magic can happen. Necessary magic can happen,
When Pepita asked Tirumeni something about this conversation, and is that just getting a clarification, Tirumeni said to her, "Enda samshayam," there's one God, I guess, and we see the same. On that note, I can't imagine asking any more questions of you on Theyyam. She's so well known amongst all the Melam people and anything related to temple, but I am
prone to disappearing. There was a time in Guruvayur once when somebody was. You can hear me anyway. There was a time in Guruvayur once. No. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was in Guruvayur once and somebody was trying to get hold of me, and the whole of Guruvayur had somebody posted to know where this somebody was so that I wouldn't be found. So I will go several extra miles for more than that, people whose world admitted me, looked after me and gave me so much. But if somebody's simply after me, they will block it all the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pepita. And she can take 2 questions. Please make your questions very short and crisp if anyone wants to talk to her.
Ma'am, what was the trigger? You were brought up in an Anglo-Saxon culture.
Yeah, Suffolk and Malabar were the same place. The same thing, the same mindset existed. It both dealt in invisible or sometimes visible magic.
All right, and if that
which gives me a hard time talking to people that expect that from me, but still.
No, but why did it take you? Why did you take?
Let me just say one.
Good.
Sorry. People of the land are the same because they have to respect what is in the earth and how that gives back to them. So it's a functioning, nurturing happening, whereas an urban thing is always after its own whatever.
All right, but my question
I mean, that's
is
my take.
All right.
You don't have to go with it.
All right.
Did you find language a barrier? Language.
No. I mean, God knows how everybody worked it out. The Thayam people worked it out. But I also tell you something else. The first time Pulickan, not Pulickan, the other one. Anyway, the deity, and the deity came up to me and talked at length to me. And I understood every single word. And then I thought, this is wonderful, it's going to work, it's going to be okay. And then as the afternoon progressed, I thought, what did he say? So I turned to somebody who had been standing beside me. So I said, did you hear what the deity said? He said, yes. I said, please tell me. He said, no. Yuta asked me if I heard what he said. I did. But I didn't know what he meant, because when they need to, they can talk to you where you understand it, but nobody else gets it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pepita. The way you share the stories is so captivating that we could listen to you forever. And please keep coming back every year with more beautiful stories to share. Thank you, Ms. Usha Verma.